Welcome to the Worthy Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten McNeil, full-service book editor and confidence coach for writers. This podcast is about empowering writers and creatives to go forward on their journey with unapologetic confidence and the reminder to write for yourself. If you enjoy what you hear, leave a review and share with your friends. Let's jump in. All right. Hello, worthy listeners. Thank you for joining me on this episode where I am chatting with Sarina Langer. So I will just jump on in and let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for having me, Kirsten. It's very exciting to be here. Mm-hmm. So, as Kirsten said, I am Sarina. I am a dark epic fantasy author from Southampton. I also work in a library. So I'm basically surrounded by books all the time, which is the dream. And I am now also dipping my feet into paranormal urban fantasy. So there's a lot of writing going on.
That's awesome. So what got you into these genres?
I've always read fantasy, I suppose. Although the first things that I wrote, actually, I don't think were very fantasy at all. They were very... I'm not really sure what to call them, to be honest, because I would have been around 6 or 7 years old and they were only like a half an A4 page long. So quite boring things like Days at the Zoo or someone overlooking a town at night. Those are the two I remember. But I've always read fantasy, and I think it's just the magic of it all and the sheer possibilities of how you can do anything in the epic fantasy genre. You know, you can open the book and be in a completely different world, possibly on a different planet if you're also throwing sci-fi in there, or something very futuristic, or just something with a completely different magic system. It's very exciting. You can do anything in epic fantasy, and I think that's probably what I like about it. That's my favorite thing to do, is the world building. So that marries well with that.
Yeah, one thing I've always been in awe of for fantasy is just like the world building that comes into it, and just how many moving parts can just be brought in. And it's like you said, it's just like the magical of it all. And it's very exciting.
Oh yeah, you can go in so many different directions, and I enjoy doing this a lot. Just the world building of considering the different people that populate your world, who populate your world. Mm-hmm. And just gonna casually correct myself constantly. But it's just that there's so much that you can do with it, so many places you can go, places you can invent, the different people who populate every country, and then the differences in their culture and in their language and their religion and everything else. It's so much fun to play with.
Are you working on anything right now?
Maybe a few things. So in November, I want to say it was in November, I published my 7th book, Blood Wisp. So I've just sent off the sequel to that to my critique partners to finally have someone else read over that. Very glad I've reached that stage with it. And the audiobook for that is now also in production. The audiobook for my second book, Wardens of Arcos, is finally in production. And I have just started editing my 10th book, which I haven't officially named yet. So that'll be my first paranormal urban fantasy, possibly with some spice thrown in, which is new for me. So yeah. Oh, and there is a book that I'll be writing for my Patreon supporters exclusively, which will be mixing 2 of my series together. So there'll be 2 characters from the Relics of Arzak series showing up, and there'll be 2 characters from the Blood Wisp series showing up, and there'll be some new people I don't know yet. And they'll be going to some of those new places I mentioned. So that's really exciting, because I get to take things I already know, but I get to send them to a new place and see how they react to it. That's going to be great.
Yeah. Do you ever get nervous when you're sharing it with like critique partners and things like that?
Oh God, constantly. So only back in November. Okay, so I did NaNoWriMo because I can't just not do NaNoWriMo. It would go against my nature. So I don't know what it is, but I just feel happier when I'm doing it. Like the world is right again, because I'm trying to reach a very difficult goal. So last year I mostly experimented during NaNoWriMo. So I had 3 different experiments, 3 things I hadn't really done before. And I shared all of those with my Patreon supporters. And I think because they were experiments, I was quite nervous about them because I didn't really know what I was doing for one when I was writing them. So that was a bit daunting. But then to also share what's basically a first draft was quite terrifying, but they were lovely about it. But now, because the book that I've just sent to my critique partners, because it's a sequel, there is the worry that they'll say, well, I liked your first book, but this is rubbish. So you've got work to do. There is that worry. But and then with book 10, when I eventually send that off, that'll be a slight break from what I normally write. So there is then the worry that people are going to say, yeah, stick to epic fantasy, not your thing, this. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can understand that. When you're sharing something that you've worked so hard on, you just want people to like praise you and just say like, yeah, this is perfect. You don't need to change it, right?
It's like, yes, please just tell me that this is great and I can publish it and we can be done with this. That would be great. I was really, really worried actually when I sent Blood Wisp to my editor and my critique partners, because it had been such a hellish nightmare to edit. What fun that one was to do. So I think I was mostly very tired when I finally sent that one to other people. And my worry there was definitely that they would say, nah, you have so much more work to do on this, because I was just so done with it by that point that I think if they had told me that it needs a ton more work, I would have said, you know what, I'm going to put this aside. I'll come back to it in like 5 years from now when all the pain and the exhaustion of the last few years has died off. I'll come back to it then. But fortunately, they liked it, so it was fine. It was a hard one to do.
For the writers listening, do you have any tips or advice on like dealing with, those nerves and, working with critique partners and everything?
Yeah, just do it. Which probably isn't very helpful, but you need to remember when you send it to your critique partners that those people are there to help you. So no one is out to get you. Although, I know it's really, really terrifying when you send it to people. When I sent my first book that I published, Rise of the Sparrows, when I sent it off to beta readers, I didn't even know what critique partners were. I didn't know there was a whole other category of early readers who could help me. So if you're working on your first book now and you're getting critique partners and beta readers, you're already way ahead of where I was at your point. So good on you. And if you didn't know, you know now. So you're welcome. But I think I basically compiled their feedback in one Word document, and I had everything color coded because that's the kind of person I am. And I think I had 30 pages worth of comments, and most of them were things like, this makes no sense, I don't understand what this is, or you've missed a word there. Thank God if it's just small things like I've missed a word somewhere on your magical writing adventure. So it is such a big learning curve. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out and ask other people for help. And I think if they know that this is the first time you're doing this, they'll hopefully also be a little easier on you. They won't just say, this is rubbish, trash it and burn the whole thing. It's unlikely that they will say that. They'll probably be quite encouraging, really. And I don't know about you, Kirsten, but that's what I found in the writing community. It's incredibly supportive and welcoming. So I think if you just put yourself out there, if you tell people that you're nervous because it's your first time, they'll be gentle with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, especially when you're just starting out, like you can't be expected to know everything and know everything about critique partners and beta readers and all that. And I love your color coding system. I think that's a good way to organize it all. I myself very much like organization and stuff. So
I color code everything, so I couldn't just not do that. I mean, even on my monthly calendar that I've got hanging next to I can show you, next to my desk, I give myself stickers because I'm 5 years old. So I give myself stickers every day so I give myself stars when I've edited, and I give myself hearts when I've written. So even though there is no different meaning to the colors, I kind of still categorize even on my sticker system. So yeah, I have a system for everything. I think this is why it's why I'm self-published rather than traditionally published, because I'm one hell of a control freak. So yeah. This is how we do things. And if it's okay to talk a bit more about advice for new writers with the whole critique partner front, one of my friends on Instagram is thinking about writing her first book, and she asked recently if there might be anyone who might be happy to go over her first 2 chapters and just tell her if it's worth writing at all. So I volunteered for that, and I've gone over it. And generally, if this is you right now, you should know that your idea is always worth writing. I mean, you might well decide that while you're writing it that maybe you don't like it that much after all, or maybe it'll fuse into something completely different, and that's fine too. But you will only really find that out for yourself if you put down the words and write that book. And, I mean, I think especially with the first book, it's so easy to completely overthink it and go, oh, but what if this sentence isn't perfect? Or what if my midpoint doesn't hit hard enough? And I don't even know what a midpoint is, except for the middle. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Just write the damn thing. And so many people start writing a book and most of them don't finish, because it is one hell of a job. And as I've already said, it's one hell of a learning curve. So it's really easy to get intimidated by that. But if you reach out and ask for help, there'll be so many people happy to help you, Kirsten and myself included. And we can tell you that your idea is great and you should totally continue that book all day long. And now all the fancy editing and fixing on all that can come later, but you can only fix it if you've written it in the first place. So just get it down and worry about making it magical later.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I absolutely agree. Yeah. It's like there have been a couple people that have reached out to me like, oh, is this idea good enough? And, those kind of thoughts, right? And I'm just like, every idea is good enough. You just kind of have to put in the work to find ways to improve it, because I think every idea is valuable. You just have to find what works, right?
Exactly. And that's it right there. It's an idea. It's not a finished book. You're not publishing your idea. It's just the starting point from which you will grow your whole novel magically overnight. It'll write itself if you put it away and think about it hard enough. So, by the time you're publishing it, it'll have possibly become something quite different. And, by that point, it may have strayed a bit from what your original idea was. So just start. If you have an idea, that's fantastic. Run with that and just see where it takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were to think back to the first day, I guess, of your writing journey compared to where you are now, what's some kind of advice or something you'd want to share about that?
Let me think back to the first book I wrote that I didn't publish and compare that, because that's still valid, right? So just so you know, just because you've written a book doesn't mean that you have to publish it. And that's not necessarily because you think it's rubbish. You don't need to publish everything that you write. It's fine to write some things just for yourself and keep them back. I think a lot of fear actually stems from that. It's worried that someone will hate what you've written or that it's not good enough to be published. But you don't have to publish it just because you've written it. It's fine to just write for yourself. So my first book that I ever wrote that I didn't publish, I didn't not publish it. I think that makes sense. Because I didn't believe in it enough or anything. It's because I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't realize at the time that you could just do it yourself. And thank the gods I didn't know, because what a bad first foot in the business that would have been. But I basically pantsed the whole book. So if you don't know that, I basically improvised everything. I had no plan. I sort of had a plan, but I didn't have an outline. I didn't really have a plot. I kind of just barfed it all out onto the document. And I didn't take criticism very well at the time. So I asked my boyfriend to read it. And there's your first lesson right there. My boyfriend is not a reader. So if you're going to ask for feedback, ask someone for feedback who loves the genre you write, not someone who doesn't get books. Bad start right there. So, but, he did have some really valuable comments on grammar and, some turns of phrase that I used that weren't quite right, because English isn't my first language. So I didn't know that I was probably misusing some things. And I didn't take very well to his feedback at the time. I got quite defensive of it. I was saying things like, oh, but it's fine in my book because, and you think like, no, that's not how grammar works. Yeah, I approach things very differently now. Also at the time, I thought that if I write a book, it has to be a series, because I guess that's just what I was reading. I didn't really read standalones, and not so much because I wasn't interested, more because I didn't know that they existed. So, I thought that if you write a fantasy book, it has to be a series, which also isn't the case. You can do anything, it's your book. I eventually sat down and thought maybe I'll get more into this if I start to write the sequel, and I had no idea where to go with it at all. Like, I was completely blank. I kind of tried to get something down, but it was very forced, and I imagine it probably read very forced because I just had no clue whatsoever. So I don't think I ever finished the sequel. Good riddance. My boyfriend still has it. He still has the book. I hoped it was gone, because I'm pretty sure I deleted it, but he kept it, and I just know that one day he will use it as leverage for something. But yeah, I mean, I am now editing my 10th book that I will publish. Yeah, my approach has changed a fair bit. I am a very convinced plotter, but I'm a flexible plotter. So I will have an outline, and I will know where my characters need to be at certain points in the book for the whole thing to still come together. I'm also flexible enough with it that if one of my characters says, actually, this thing over here that we only mentioned once very briefly in passing in hushed whispers, that sounds interesting, I'm going to go explore that a bit more. I'm not going to say, oh no, but I didn't plan for that, we can't do that. I'm going to say, okay, yeah, cool, sure, let's just see what happens with that and just go with that. And you could get a whole new side plot out of that. When I wrote this book, one of my characters out of nowhere just said, oh, this person is hiding something. And I sat back and thought, is she? Are you sure? Where's this gonna go? I don't remember authorizing this, but I went with it, and out of that came probably the biggest plot twist I would never have thought of myself if I hadn't pursued that plot bunny. So yeah, I just run with it. I think your question was how much my approach has changed. So I'm sorry if I've gone off track a little bit there. So
okay.
Yeah, I'd also like to think that I take feedback a lot better now. So for one, now when I send it off to people who actually read my genre and who are interested in these books, maybe even people who volunteered, who didn't just get roped into it because they love me. So that helps. I mean, don't get me wrong, you don't have to accept every bit of feedback that you get sent. There'll be some things in there that just don't really work, or that there might be by people who mean well but don't necessarily understand your book in the same way that you do. So I think you do have to learn to differentiate between useful feedback that you also agree with, feedback that kind of cuts you very deeply, but that really, if you're honest with yourself, are things that you should probably address, and then things that just don't really help anything. So to give an example, with my first book, because it's named Rise of the Sparrows, so there are no birds in this book. Okay, it's a resistance movement. These are people. Think of them more like an organization. But one of my beta readers said that he'd wanted there to be more animals throughout the book, which is sweet. And I'm grateful that he read the whole thing and thought about it, but it has nothing to do with the book. I didn't turn the people into actual birds because that wouldn't have worked. So, know what you need to accept, know what you have to work with in your book, but also know what to let go and not take in. You don't have to accept every bit of feedback. And I think because you've asked people to give you feedback and to help you work on this book, it's then very easy for your beta readers and critique partners to overthink it, because they want to do a good job. They said that they would do you this favor and they want to do well for you. So I think that can easily lead to them overthinking every single sentence, because they've said that they help. I think maybe some think that if they give it back to you and say that they really loved it, and maybe it was just that the middle was a bit slow for them, maybe that's not enough feedback. So they really do overthink every single sentence. And once you start doing that, you no longer read the book for the book. You don't really read it as a reader. So be aware of that when you get feedback as well. So if you send it to someone and they send it back and they've basically torn every sentence in threes, and maybe buried some of the parts of it and maybe set fire to it. It doesn't mean that your book is bad, and it doesn't mean that you have to accept every single thing that they said. It might just be that they've overthought it because they've said that they would help and they want to do a good job for you. I'll stop now. I'm done.
No, I agree with like everything you said. For the listeners who obviously can't see us, I was basically nodding the whole time. Like, I think that's really important for all writers to remember. And you have a lot of advice, and with the amount of books you've written, you've definitely learned a lot. So thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate it.
I hope it helps. And even now, where I'm starting to sort of slowly approach my 11th book, there are still things that I've never done before. I've only recently signed up to Story Origin, and I'm still feeling around with that. And only earlier I talked to someone who swears by Facebook groups to find advanced readers, which I've never tried. So, don't get me wrong, the learning curve is definitely steepest with your first book, but I'm sort of more on a gentle slope now. But it's still a learning opportunity, and there are still things that I haven't done before. There are, still things that I will continue to learn.
I think that's true through a writer's entire journey. Like, there's always going to be something
Yes,
new that comes out, something more to learn. So yeah.
absolutely. And your whole approach to writing your books is going to change as you go anyway. Don't think that just because you have a good approach for your current book that the same thing is going to work for your next book, because it might not.
Mm-hmm.
And you might adjust things here and there as you go, which is perfectly fine. It's a living thing, basically. It's going to grow with you, it's going to adapt with you. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Just run
Absolutely.
with it.
Yeah, well, I would love to chat all day, every day about this, because I agree with everything you said, but I think we're gonna bring things to a close. So I just want to thank you for being here and sharing your journey and your advice. I know it'll be really valuable for my listeners here. So is there any last things you want to share that is really important to you, or just really important that you think writers should know?
Well, as you said, you could chat about this all day, and so could I. So that's actually a dangerous question. The only thing I want to throw in there that I don't think I've mentioned already is perfection is an illusion. So don't get hung up on it. Your book will never be perfect. Your book will never be right for everyone. No matter how much work you put into this thing, no matter how close to perfection you think you are, there will be someone out there who will pick it up and hate every single word. And that is fine. Your book isn't for everyone, and I can't stress this enough, it will never be perfect. Nothing is perfect. Perfection isn't real. You can totally strive for it, but please also accept that you will never reach it. Make your peace with that now, and you will have a much happier writing life.
All right, well, thanks again, Sarina. I wish you luck on your future journey.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Worthy Writers podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Leave a review, then subscribe to both my newsletters for stories from my life and tips on building a desirable writing journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas for future episodes as well. My link tree is in the show notes with all the places we can connect. Welcome to my community. Happy writing, Worthy Writers!